Could we please open this meeting with this prayer for America revealed by Abdu'l-Baha? O thou kind Lord, this gathering is turning to Thee. These hearts are radiant with Thy love. These minds and spirits are exhilarated by the message of Thy glad tidings. O God, let this American democracy become glorious in spiritual degrees, even as it has aspired to material degrees, and render this just government victorious. Confirm this revered nation to upraise the standard of the oneness of humanity, to promulgate the most great peace, to become thereby most glorious and praiseworthy among all the nations of the world. O God, this American nation is worthy of Thy favors and is deserving of Thy mercy. Make it precious and near to Thee through Thy bounty and bestowal. Just so people realize they're in the place they would like to be, I am Steve Suhm, and we're going to be talking about new dimensions in learning. And I would like to very quickly just give you a little bit of my background so you have an idea of where I'm coming from. And I guess I'm doing that because I have a bias. When I hear people talk, I like to know a little bit about them, because it gives me a frame of reference on which to bounce off the things that I'm learning. I was born and raised in a Baha'i home in Milwaukee, and as with all of us, the Baha'i faith is the most important aspect of our lives. By training, I am a psychologist, and I work with the public schools in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. I have been extremely interested in the process of learning because as a psychologist working in the schools, students are referred to me who are having some kind of difficulty in the learning process. The writings are filled with information about the learning process. And what I would like to do today is to give an overview of what the scientific community is saying about the learning process. And I hope that you can get a glimmer of the excitement that I feel about learning so that it has a beneficial effect on you as you continue on in your Baha'i life and your professional careers and so forth. Let's begin with something written by Abdu'l-Baha 69 years ago, and it appeared in Star of the West and is entitled A Word Picture of the Old World. And I think that's one of the things that we have to constantly keep in mind as Baha'is. Many of the things we're picking up from the outside world are based on old world values. And what we're getting through our inspirational reading of the Baha'i writings are the New World values. And how do we sort out, how do we begin to determine how to get involved in that New World process more quickly? And I think there are some very distinct ways of doing it, and we're going to experience some of them today. This is the little piece that appeared in Star of the West. Look thou with seeing eyes at the world about thee and at the inhabitants thereof. Upon the stage of this immense theater, most spectacular plays are being enacted. On one side thereof thou wilt see the victorious and the vanquished legions of profit and loss. On the other side thou wilt observe the waves of the sea of folly rising and falling. Cries are being raised on every side, and the agonies of revolution, revolt, and unrest reach unto the ears of progressive men. There is a tremendous strike and clash between capital and labor. And the war between the aristocrats and democrats is carried on relentlessly with bow and arrow, sword and javelin. The phalanxes of the great army are drawn in battle array, each division taking its position. Armed troops and artillery are to be found in every part of the field. The flash of the swords of enmity blind the eyes from even the most remote distance. the lightning effect of breastplate and lance and the sparkle of the bucklers of hatred light up the night and bewilder the sight. In short, strife, battle, slaughter, and war are prepared in organized perfection. On the other hand, thou wilt hear that from every house strains of music are raised, and confusing melodies of harp, lyre, cymbal, and flute are heard, and mad revelers are dancing to the tunes, while they are inebriated with the wine of vanishing pleasures. In one place thou wilt behold the wanton and soiled decorations, and in another the flimsy shows of the gilded class of creatures. On the one hand is to be seen the embellishment and luxury made possible through illicit wealth, and on the other hand the ravishing of this mortal world of its beautiful appearance. From different parts are to be heard sighs of anguish, lamentations of poverty, cries of agony and misery, and the calls for succor have reached to the gate of heaven. One hears the weeping of the hopeless, the appeals of the oppressed, the trembling murmurs of the helpless, and the harrowing wails of the shipwrecked in the sea of persecution. The heat of the conflagration of separation spreads on all sides. The fire of longing is raging with great intensity, and the tongues of the flames of calamity leap forth in every direction. Here one sees the oppression of kings and the thoughtlessness of cabinet ministers. There one sees conflict at the battlefield of thoughts and ideals by ambitious generals, statesmen, and administrators of the nations and countries. They consult, scheme, plot, and exchange views. They organize fallacious and superfluous companies and make false the established values, and thus do they lay and destroy the foundation of their political careers. In short, when thou observest these things with the eye of reality, thou wilt see that the outcome, result, and fruit of all these theatrical performances are mirages, and their sweetness is bitter poison. A few days the earth shall roll on its axis, and these fleeting visions will be completely forgotten. When thou shuttest thine eyes to this dark world, and lookest upward and heavenward, thou wilt see light upon light, stretching from eternity to eternity. The reality of the mysteries will be revealed. Happy is the pure soul who does not attract himself to the transient conditions and comforts, but rather seeks to attach himself to the purity, nobility, and splendor of the world which endures. And as I was preparing for this workshop, I think that's what we're looking at. How do we prevent ourselves from getting caught up in the world around us? And how do we instead attach ourselves to the spiritual qualities and the development of the spiritual qualities? Okay, let's step back for a second and look at the process of learning, because that's really what we're talking about. How does a person change behavior? Learning is a change in behavior. And there are steps in that process. We heard Steve Birkeland say this morning that Abdu'l-Baha is saying he wants our every thought to be connected to the Baha'i faith and the establishment of the kingdom of God on earth. Those are the directions we're given. How do we get from where we are to that point? If you were to look in Baha'i World Faith on page 317, Abdu'l-Baha talks about 5 physical powers, physical entities that help us to relate and react to the world about us. And on those pages, he is talking about the physical senses: vision, hearing, taste, touch, and smell. Now, we have instruments available that allow us to test individuals, and it's done very quickly. It takes about 15 minutes. we can determine which is your important sense modality to get information into your head. And one of the frightening things we have found is that if you tend to be a visual learner, namely the kind of person who is taking most of the information in through his or her eyes, then you probably are a visual teacher when you try to teach others. The assumption each one of us tends to make is that everybody learns the way I learn. Well, we now know that isn't the case. In fact, we're doing some rather exciting things when we're looking at children, and we're finding out that the child learns one way, the teacher learns a second way, and mother learns a third way. But you know what happens? The two adults call me and they say, as a psychologist, there's something wrong with Johnny because he doesn't learn correctly. We now have scientific evidence and ammunition to go back and say, there is nothing wrong with Johnny, you just haven't learned the way he learns. So we are able to begin to pinpoint important sense modalities. Now, the person who is visually oriented is the one who takes in virtually everything through his ears. Through his eyes. That person would be in trouble sitting in this room today. Because most of what we're doing here are presentations with oral communication. There's something else that handicaps that process. The average speaker standing in front of an audience speaks at the rate of 100 to 125 words a minute. The thought speed of this particular audience at this time of the day is between 600 and 800 words a minute. I know what you folks are doing to me. You do what all audiences do. You tune in and you get an idea of where I'm going and you rip out for a mental holiday. And 30 seconds later you come back and you say, oh yeah, he's still on the same subject, and you rip out for another mental holiday. Students do that in classrooms. Husbands do that when they listen to their wives. You folks are doing that when you listen to me. Your thought speed is also going to be related, and your thought processes are going to be related to how you tend to learn. We now have little hints that when you listen to speakers, you can tell how they tend to learn. I'm a strong visual learner. I've been tested. Visual input is important for me. When I teach visually even though I use words, because I will use terms such as, why don't you look at it this way? I think you should see it like this. So what I am doing is I'm doing the same thing every one of us does. We are reacting to reality the way we as individuals react to reality, and we expect everybody out there to react the same way. And there's some of you that I am not communicating well with because of the words I'm using and the way I'm expressing it. Basically, from educational points of view, there are three areas we're concerned about in terms of input systems. We want to know how well a person learns visually. We want to know how well they learn auditorily. And we want to know how well they learn kinesthetically. A kinesthetic is an interesting one. Lots of young children are kinesthetic. We're talking about tactile sensation. We're talking about emotional feeling levels. And we have kids that run around and they touch everything. They pick up things. They've got to be movers. They have to be doers. They have to handle things with their hands. We also know that there are certain kinds of learners who are in trouble with other kinds of learners. It's unfortunate if a kinesthetic child has a visual mother. Visual mothers like everything in their place. You look at their coffee table at home and everything is symmetrical. The books are piled in nice, neat piles. There is not a speck of dust on anything, because when they see it, they get uncomfortable. Kinesthetic child does things that make them feel good. They're the movers and the touchers. And guess what? They move the piles. They touch the newly dusted coffee table, and now there are fingerprints on it. Or Dad comes home from work and kicks off his shoes and puts his can of Coke in the middle of the table and puts his feet up, and visual housewife comes in and says, "What are you doing?" And he says, "But I feel good." And she says, "But you're disrupting the order." So we've got a lot of communication problems just because people learn differently. And the thing I maintain, there is nothing wrong with any of these learning styles. The goals I have for kids that I work with is, I would like you to be able to learn visually. I would like you to be able to learn auditorily. I would like you to be able to learn kinesthetically. I'm going to offer a challenge. Is there anyone in this room that can tell me the difference between sugar and salt by touch? I have seen kindergarten kids do it 100% of the time. It is possible to learn sugar and salt by touch. Probably the reason we didn't learn it is no one taught it to us, and we didn't realize it's possible because kinesthetics is down on our list in terms of the learning process. Now let me move beyond the input systems for a second, and then I'll prove a point with you. What do you do with the information you take in once you get it inside your head? I'm going to pose an extremely challenging question to you. How do you think? Do you think in words? Do you think in pictures? Or do you think in feelings? And my guess is there are a large number of people sitting out there right now who say, "I don't know. I never thought of it. I never considered that." Let me give you an example of the kinds of things I've run into, and then we'll get back to the writings and show how this fits. There's a simple little imagery test that we can give which gets at how does a person form images. And I can ask you simple questions such as, can you picture a blank television screen? If you get a nice clear image, you give yourself a 4. If you can't get the image at all, you give yourself a 0. So you can rate yourself 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4. Okay? And then we go through a series of things such as, imagine the sound of a barking dog. Rate yourself 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4. What does it feel like to walk on a hot sand beach barefooted? Can you imagine yourself smelling a rose? What is the smell of cooking cabbage? You can go through every one of the modalities and you can check yourself out. Which images do you develop very, very clearly? Now, I did this in a class I was teaching. A woman came up immediately after the class was dismissed, all upset. She said, "I've got a problem." I said, "What is it?" She said, "I can't form any auditory images." I said, "Let's check that out for a second. Can you imagine right now what your husband's voice sounds like?" She said, "No, No idea. Can you imagine what my voice sounds like if I stop talking right now? She said, no. I said, what do you do when you listen to a talk? She said, I do what everyone else does. And I said, what's that? She said, I picture an arm from the elbow down, writing the talk on the blackboard, and I read the blackboard. Now you have the same reaction I had. If we had time and we went around the room, we would have equally amazing thought processes going on right here, right now. I had another woman who said she could form no auditory images. And she said she is an artist. Just by hobby, she is an artist. And one of the items I asked them to imagine was, imagine the sound of a barking dog. She said I could see as clearly as if it was happening. I was driving down my street on a bright sunny day in summer. I saw my house. I turned right into my driveway. I saw my front door open up. I saw my dog come bouncing out of the door. I saw his mouth open, and there was no sound. But she said, I can paint the whole thing for you if you want me to. The point is, how do we relate to a person like that if we don't even if we're not understanding where they're coming from? How do we begin to help people to learn about the Baha'i teachings from their frame of reference rather than from ours? Now let me give you an example of what I'm talking about from the writings. Now one of the beautiful things about the writings is we have God speaking to mankind anywhere in the world through His latest messenger. And guess what? Those messengers know something about how people learn. In a few minutes we're going to get into the area of differences in learning in Eastern versus Western hemispheres and some of the excitement that comes from that, because that gets just as mind-boggling. Okay, here's a prayer revealed by Baha'u'llah. And what I would like you to do as I read this prayer is go with the images that are conveyed verbally through the words, but will help you to understand what God's messenger is telling us. From the sweet-scented streams of thine eternity, give me to drink, O my God, and of the fruits of the tree of thy being, enable me to taste, O my hope. From the crystal springs of thy love, suffer me to quaff, O my glory, and beneath the shadow of thine everlasting providence, let me abide, O my light. Within the meadows of thy nearness, before thy presence, make me able to roam, O my beloved, and at the right hand of the throne of thy mercy, seat me, O my desire. From the fragrant breezes of thy joy, let a breath pass over me, O my goal, and into the heights of the paradise of thy reality, let me gain admission, O my adored one. To the melodies of the dove of thy oneness, suffer me to hearken, O resplendent one, and through the spirit of thy power and thy might, quicken me, O my provider. In the spirit of thy love, keep me steadfast, O my succorer, and in the path of thy good pleasure, set firm my steps, O my maker. Within the garden of thine immortality, before thy countenance, let me abide forever, O thou who art merciful unto me. And upon the seat of thy glory establish me, O thou who art my possessor. To the heaven of thy loving kindness lift me up, O my quickener, and unto the day star of thy guidance lead me, O thou my attractor. Before the revelations of thine invisible Spirit summon me to be present. Thou who art my origin and my highest wish, and unto the essence of the fragrance of thy beauty, which thou wilt manifest, cause me to return, O thou who art my God. Potent art thou to do what pleaseth thee. Thou art verily the most exalted, the all-glorious, the all-highest. I don't know how you feel. Every one of the images, every one of the sense modalities is covered. Read the writings. The writings are filled with images. They're filled with ways of helping people who learn different ways to understand God's message for today. And I am amazed at the number of professional teachers who have not tried to get into the learning styles of students and tried to help them using different approaches. But on the other hand, I'm not amazed because the research shows us that by the time you reach age 12, you're pretty well locked into your learning system. That's the system you're going to be stuck with the rest of your life. Now, we've worked with enough adults, and yes, indeed, you can change learning styles. You can change perceptions of what's going on around you, the same as you can very easily learn to fold your hands the other way. If you practice folding them the other way, pretty soon it doesn't make any difference how you fold your hands. But the first time you do it, you say, oh my goodness, that doesn't feel right. The same thing is true if you have been a visual learner your whole life, and all of a sudden someone comes along and says, hey, there's such a thing as auditory messages. You can learn to play things inside your head. What about feeling levels? And I maintain that our understanding of these beautiful writings are dependent in part upon how fully do we imagine and comprehend the messages that are coming to us. We would like to get those messages through every channel possible. Educators have talked about something called multimodal education. There's a lot of research that shows if you get the information into a person's head visually and auditorily and kinesthetically, they've got a better chance of learning. And yes, it is possible to learn to develop images. It is as simple as, well, let me give you an example. We know that poor spellers in school are auditory processors. Poor spellers process spelling skills phonetically, and all of their errors are phonetic when they give you a spelling word back. We know that good spellers are visual processors. Now, how do you help to make an auditory processor a visual processor? Give you an example. A third grade boy was referred to me because he was an atrocious speller. We went to my office, we sat down and chatted about it. I asked him to spell a couple of third grade spelling words to me, which he did, all with phonetic errors. And I felt, here we have a child who is processing incorrectly to solve the problem we were giving him. I said to him, can you spell the word psychologist? third grade now, okay? Can you spell psychologist? He said, no, I can't spell that. I said, would you like to learn it? He said, okay. I said, can you picture a football in your head? Make believe you're looking at the side of a football. Can you see it there? He said, yeah, I see it. I said, all right. I'm going to print the word psychologist on the side of your football with a large black magic marker. Here we go. P, S, Y. You see those letters for me? He said, yeah. We went through it once. I said, read back the football. No errors. The bell rang. It was the end of the school day. I didn't see the child for another week. He was in the hall on his way out for recess. I ran over to him. I said, how do you spell psychologist? And he spelled it out perfectly. We had gone through it once. Now what we did, the teacher and I got together and we said, hey, we want to teach him how to learn to spell. Some people think that's cheating. Because you're taking the blackboard with you. That's not cheating. That's not cheating. You can learn to develop those skills. And how do you teach the child? You have him look at the blackboard with the spelling words on it, close his eyes and try to develop the image, open his eyes and correct the image, close his eyes, and you keep working at that until eventually he's got some spelling skills. The same thing is true when you read the writings. What are we told to do concerning past learning? Forget past learning. I feel the reason we're told to forget past learning is because it creates ruts for us. I like the definition of a rut that I heard. A rut is a grave with the ends kicked out. We read things the same way we've always read them, and we don't open up all of those channels to say, I'm going to try to perceive these things using all of the tools I've got. Try to get into the imagery of what it is you're reading. The prayer I just read to me is fantastic. You can read one sentence and sit and contemplate, develop the image of that one sentence. We're going to have some more readings from the writings at the tail end that also have images and talk about thought processes. And what I'm going to ask you to do is to try to go through that process, doing away with your formal learning. Because your formal learning is getting you into difficulty because you're saying, oh yeah, I know what it means. And then we start interpreting, and then we start getting off track. Okay, let me move on quickly to the next area. Intelligence testing. That's one of the big areas of my responsibility. I'm responsible for doing lots and lots and lots of testing with students. We look at their needs. Do they need special programs and so forth? Intelligence tests up until about 2 years ago were basically static tests. How much information have you picked up from your past that you still retain and it's here? The new testing is getting exciting because now we're talking about processing information. How do you process information? You take it in through your senses, we know that. What do you do with it once it gets inside your head? And it's really getting exciting because now I've got some real ammunition to go back to parents and teachers with and say, this appears to be the way this child learns best. And teachers and parents are coming back and saying, you're right, it works. The real challenge is with the adult that chooses not to use the information. The adult who's a strong visual learner who all of a sudden has to become auditory, and you say, oh, it's too hard. It's too difficult. I can't do that. You know who the best learners in the world are? Children. Most fantastic learners in the world are children. In fact, the new teaching of teachers is talking about teachers becoming childlike so that you can open up those areas. Okay, basically there are two ways we process information. One of them is sequentially. And if you have read any of the studies on right-left hemisphere specialization, we're talking about left hemisphere skills of the brain. We process things in a neat, orderly, sequential fashion. The other way we process information is holistically. The sequential processing is basically phonetic in nature. It comes at us through auditory channels, or we take whatever input and we put it into auditory channels to make a sequence and a process out of it. The Americans pride themselves in the scientific approach. We get all excited and we say, oh boy, the way to do it is step 1, you do such and such. Step 2, you do such and stuff. Step 3, and we pride ourselves in that kind of organization. What are we told in the Baha'i writings? The American Baha'is are going to lead the world in administration. That's no accident. The American schools have helped us to become organizers, sequential processors. But we still have that other component, and that is the visual processor, the holistic learner. And there are distinct ways you teach both kinds of people. With sequential processors, you give it to them in a sequential manner, step by step. With a holistic learner, it's best to say, this is what we're aiming at. You give them the picture of the end result first. And then you go back to tell them how they're going to get there. And as you go back and go through the process, to get here, we have to do this first. But remember, we're still going for this. And then we do this second. But remember, we're going for this. And you always refer back to the end product. The sequential processor is not necessarily concerned about the end product. Which step am I at now? Oh, okay, 4. That means 5 comes next. And then when they're all done, they say, okay, give me the next one. Oh, there isn't another one? All right, now what's the next task we have to do? All right, step 1, step 2. They think that way. And it really gets interesting when you try to adapt these things into classroom settings. When you try to communicate to audiences. For example, it's a tremendous challenge for someone like myself to get up and try to communicate with a room full of people. You people are coming from all kinds of points of view. If you've been educated in the Western schools, you are pretty much sequential left hemisphere processors. If you have come from some of the Eastern countries, there they focus on visualization, holistic learning. Read Seven Valleys. Seven Valleys is a nice book to read, but if you're a step-by-step sequential processor, you're going to say, but I don't understand. But I don't know what it's all about. But the Eastern thought people, they read it and say, oh, wow, beautiful. Because they're communicating ideas and concepts at different levels. We are now working with techniques, and it's been done already. Right hemisphere is the hemisphere responsible for visualization. It's responsible for creativity, for intuition, for metaphorical thinking. And guess what? We now have ways of teaching creativity. Did you hear what I said? There are now methods to teach creativity. That to me is mind-boggling. Some of you have heard this story before, but I'm going to relay it because it's one of those goosebump experiences that I had. that I'm sure I will never forget. When our kids were small, we used to play the Milton Bradley game called the memory game, consisting of 50 little pairs of cards. And when it's my turn, I get to turn 2 cards over, and if they match, I get to keep them. Okay? Visual memory. If they don't match, I turn them face down on the table again, and then the other person takes their turn. But I've got to remember where those cards were. Okay? When the kids were very young, we'd start out with 5 pairs of cards, and then we'd add cards as they got older. Well, our daughter was 4 years old, and we played with 50 pairs of cards. I put them down on the table in 10 rows of 10 columns each. We finished the game. I had a stack in front of me like this, and Mindy had a stack in front of her like this, and she said, "Dad, that's not fair." And I said, "What's not fair?" She said, "You put the cards down." From my naive point of view, I didn't have the foggiest notion what difference that would make. But I said to her, "Okay, why don't you put the cards down?" What a learning experience. I didn't know there were other ways to put the cards down. I put them down in rows and columns. Why? I've been educated in the American system. Logic, order, method is important. My learning process is 4th row, 5th column is the dog. Okay? That's the way I learn. She put the cards down and she said hodgepodge. And she spread them around on the table. And there went my system. And at age 4, when Mindy put the cards down, she won. When I put the cards down, I won. But then I asked the inane left hemisphere question, "How did you do that?" She didn't know. A how-to question is a left hemisphere question, implying she can now tell me, "Okay, if you want to do that, Dad, you do this first and this second." She couldn't tell me. When she reached age 9, and this is really the exciting part, when she reached age 9, she beat me no matter who put the cards down. When she reached age 12, she said, "Dad, I don't want to play with you anymore because I always win." But the point is, to win at the memory game, it doesn't make any difference how you put the cards down. But what I was doing, I was trying to impose my learning style on her. I'm glad she was perceptive enough to say, "Dad, that's not fair." Now, about 2 weeks later, we had some friends come over to the house for dinner. The fellow had his doctorate and his girlfriend had her master's degree, and we finished dinner. And Mindy said, "You guys want to play a game?" He said, "Okay." So she ran to her room and came out with the Milton Bradley memory game. She said, "Have you played this before?" And they said, "No." She said, "Here's the way you do it. I put the cards down." And my wife and I smiled at each other. And you know who won? In fact, the other fellow was so upset about it, he said, "Steve, if you ever tell anybody that your 4-year-old daughter beat me at a game," he said, "we're not friends anymore." He was serious. But the point is, either approach works. And I think as we listen to people teaching the faith, as we listen to people presenting firesides, we have to keep an open mind and say, anybody is going to present information to others based on their learning styles. But I hope we leave the door open for other people to say, "Hey, maybe you've got a style I missed. Maybe there's something I didn't understand in the question you asked." But I think it also means that if we are presenting, and I'm trying to do it today, if we are presenting, it is good from time to time to say, we are talking about the establishment of the kingdom of God on earth. That's the end product we're looking at. We are going to become a spiritualized mankind. That's the end product we're looking at. And here's where we are in the particular state of development to get to that end product. So we can constantly refer back, and we can also come back to those beginning steps and say, these have to be accomplished first. And yes, there has to be administration. That's important because that creates order so people can work together and so forth. But we can refer back to those things. And we can also get back to those writings so that we can begin to understand those writings from a new perspective. And that's really the key element that I wanted to give you today, is how do we begin that process? How do we get back to those writings, which we are supposed to do so that they ignite that creativity within us, so we begin to become members of that army that we are promised we can become, so that we can begin to be that lamp through which the light shines, so we have an influence on the world. How do we begin that? And I think we've got some very neat ideals that have come from research. We are finding, for example, that we can learn at least 2 to 5 times faster than we ever thought we were capable of. It is being done. Some of you have heard about concepts such as super learning, which are concepts that came out of Bulgaria. In this country, they call them the same ideas: accelerated learning, optimal learning, all kinds of terms. They are all related to the same kind of research, that there are ways that we can make ourselves open to ideas coming from the world around us. And one of the things that tends to happen, remember I said at the outset that one of the problems we were going to have today is your thought speed is 6 to 8 times faster than mine, than my speech speed. And you continued, even though I warned you, you've got rapid thought speed and you're going to be ripping out for those holidays, you continued to do it, didn't you? You're doing it right now. Now, one of the amazing things is, people say, I can't control my thoughts. Sure you can. Some of us get caught up in the dilemma. I'll give you an example. Do not think of a large pink elephant. What did I tell you not to think of? Just to process that information, you think of a large pink elephant. We have people that wake up in the morning and immediately their thought processes are saying such things as, today is not going to be as bad as yesterday was. Boy, do I have a lot of work to do. I don't think I'll finish everything. And what's happening? The programming that's going on inside of their head is already having an influence on their behavior, which will indeed have an influence on additional programming. And it becomes a snowball effect. We have people who promise themselves when they go to bed at night, tomorrow is going to be different. I'll show them. Boy, tomorrow I'm going to wake up and everything's going to be changed. And they wake up tomorrow and it's the same as it was yesterday. How do we begin to get out of that pattern? How do we begin to get out of that rut? One of the ways is to get back to the writings. Daily obligatory prayer. What happens with prayer? Prayer is not supposed to be a concept where it's just a mere uttering of words. We're supposed to be involved so that we are communicating with God through His messenger. Do we put ourselves in the proper state, physiologically, psychologically, emotionally, before we go through that process? They have used the patterns developed in imagery to teach every subject matter we have in the schools. I talked to a history teacher who says that the recall in his history classes is phenomenal, because he doesn't say to the kids, go home and read the history and come back and take a test. He says in his classroom, today we're going to learn about the battles at Gettysburg. Make believe you're on the battlefield in Gettysburg. What is the terrain like in southern Pennsylvania? It's rolling hills. When did this battle take place in the middle of summer. It meant it must have been warm out. Therefore, it's warm, rolling hills, there are woods around, you probably see white puffy clouds in the sky, you hear the enemy coming through the woods. He says his kids have said things such as, I can smell the gunpowder. Now guess what? Now it's not book learning. Now it's a personal experience you've had. You were there. Have we been there when we commune with God? Do we put ourselves in that kind of a frame of reference, controlling those thought processes so that we are receptive to the full impact of that message that we're getting? We are promised the power in the revealed Word. And I think one of the problems we have is all of the other learning gets in the way, and we haven't opened up the doors and said we're going to let it happen. So it is possible to put ourselves or to imagine ourselves in the presence of Baha'u'llah. Now I would imagine not many of us would rush through a prayer quickly. Now all of a sudden we're communing with God through His latest messenger. Now the whole frame of reference is different. You approach it with a different attitude. And that does have an impact. We have found that a lot of our older kids that have significant learning problems in school enter any new learning situation as though I'm dumb, I'm stupid, I can't do it, no, it's impossible. And one of the things we try to incorporate very early in their training is, you can do it. It is possible. And if you want to look for those self-assurances and those personal affirmations, again, the writings are filled with them. Baha'u'llah, Abdu'l-Baha, Shoghi Effendi, the Universal House of Justice, tell us the tremendous potential inherent within each of us, if we allow it to be exhibited through us. But we have to get in that frame of mind to allow us to do it. Now what the Bulgarians did in their research, they went over to India and they started investigating the swamis and the yogas and the people that would go off into the caves and meditate for years, the people that were able to control physiological processes. They could lower heart rate, lower blood pressure, increase hand temperature, and that kind of thing. And guess what? Those are easy things to do. Any one of us can learn to have warm hands all the time. It's a simple relaxation technique. If we had time, I could teach you, but it's a very simple process. We can control those things. But they found that one of the elements that was being used in India was the use of music. And I would like to share with you a quote, here we are, from Abdu'l-Baha about music. This comes from Writings of Abdu'l-Baha, page 112, if you're interested. O bird that singeth sweetly of the Abha beauty, in this new and wondrous dispensation, the veils of superstition have been torn asunder, and the prejudices of Eastern peoples stand condemned. Among certain nations of the East, music was considered reprehensible, but in this new age, the manifest light hath in his holy tablets specifically proclaimed that music, sung or played, is spiritual food for soul and heart. And let me go back now quickly to page 317 of Baha'i World Faith, where Abdu'l-Baha described the five physical senses. He now describes the spiritual powers. See, one of the neat things about the writings is if you're in doubt, go back and read the directions. And then once you've read the directions, let's start putting it into practice. Man has also spiritual powers. Imagination, which conceives things, thought, which reflects upon realities, comprehension, which comprehends realities, memory, which retains whatever man imagines, thinks, and comprehends. The intermediary between the five outward powers and the inward powers is the sense which they possess in common. That is to say, the sense which acts between the outer and inner powers, conveys to the inner powers what the outer powers discern. It is termed the common faculty. So now we have scientific research that says we can develop imagery. We can develop it fully. We can help the person who does not image visually to image visually. We can help people to develop all of those imagery faculties. We can improve thought and memory skills. The Bulgarians did amazing studies, and in one study they found that they were successful in teaching 3,000 vocabulary words in a foreign language in 8 hours with 97% recall. 97% recall. You know what the average learning process in America is of college students? If they listen to a 10-minute talk, the average amount retained is 25% to a 10-minute talk. You're in for a little over an hour today, and you're here for the whole day. But yes, it is possible to teach people listening skills, comprehending skills, retention skills, and so forth. So, the Bulgarians started doing some research with music. They started influencing the entire environment. They would lower the light intensity, raise the light intensity. They got Hawthorne effect. We won't go into all of those details. But they found that there is certain kind of music that has a physiological relaxing characteristic to it. And it's music that is basically 60 beats per minute. And music that they found the most successful was music that was composed during the 1850s. And they don't know why. And I'm wondering if we shouldn't tell them. They found Baroque music composed during the 1850s that is basically 60 beats per minute is an important component in physiologically relaxing people. And if you relax the American public, one of the things that happens is the activity level of the left hemisphere of the brain is reduced. Which means now the right brain can also be part of the learning process. And they are getting amazing results. This has been researched at the University of California. University of Iowa has programs that have been going. I feel that there are some direct benefits that Baha'is can get because what it means, we can play that kind of music, we can get into the proper frame of mind, and then we can read the writings. And we can do away with those past interpretations and be receptive to the full impact of what those words are saying to us. In a sense, we are opening the channels. We are saying, let it happen. We're here. We're receptive. The beautiful thing about being a Baha'i is we've accepted Baha'u'llah as God's messenger for today. That means we can open those channels completely with no doubts. We can say, let it happen. Use me in any way you would like. What I would like to do for the last part of our period here today, I'm going to play some of the music. I'm going to ask you, first of all, and it's an important component, first of all, people are supposed to be relaxed. If this were an actual training session, we would have taught relaxation first. Because if you're not relaxed, it also means the left hemisphere is racing. And we don't want it to be racing. We want it to be calmed down and be receptive to those words that are coming in. So I'm going to ask people to get as relaxed as possible. That means both feet flat on the floor. That means taking a couple of deep breaths, slow, comfortable, relaxed, deep breaths. It means relaxing and getting rid of tension in any of the muscle groups, and I'll go through a couple of them that are particular problems in the American culture. One of them is jaw muscles. We've got a lot of bruxism people. They grind their teeth constantly. If your jaws are relaxed, your teeth are apart. They're not together. That means you shouldn't be scowling and frowning. It should be rhythmical breathing. The Bulgarians went through a very elaborate procedure with breathing. The Americans are finding out that that breathing process that Bulgaria came up with is not as crucial. So all the Americans say is just relax and get comfortable and breathe in a comfortable fashion. A lot of Americans are upper chest breathers. When you go home tonight, lay on your back and put one hand here and one hand here and breathe the way you normally breathe. If this hand is moving, that's not a comfortable, relaxed breathing pattern. This hand should be moving. Watch a newborn child. Every newborn child is a diaphragm breather. We teach people in our society, hold your stomach in, and, then we create all kinds of tensions and pressures. If you have tension creeping in, that is also going to handicap the learning process. They found the most successful learning occurs when people are relaxed. You're slowing down the activity level of the left hemisphere of the brain. You are making yourself receptive to the words and the power in those words. You try to get in tune with those words. And as I read, I would like you to get into the imagery of what Abdu'l-Baha or Baha'u'llah is saying in the passages that I read. See if it doesn't have a different impact on you. You might walk out of here saying, I feel a little different, but I don't know why. Don't worry about why. When we're told to do something, we're not supposed to start becoming judgmental, which is that left hemisphere creeping in again. When we're told to do it, we do it. So I'm going to start the music. I'm going to let it play for a short time just so you can kind of get in tune with the music. Then what I will do is I will read some passages. At the end, I am going to stop my reading, and they find it's very important to have a short period of time after the learned material to let it kind of settle in. People tend to say, okay, I'm supposed to read every day, so they sit down, they read a paragraph, and they get up and go about their everyday activities. It's having an effect, but it's not having the impact it can have. So what I'm going to do is try to follow this closely. Get into the music in terms of listening. Listen to what the readings have to say and what it does to you internally. And then we will have a short period of time with just music, and then I'll stop the music and we'll be finished. brother, when a true seeker determines to take the step of search in the path leading to the knowledge of the Ancient of Days, he must, before all else, cleanse and purify his heart, which is the seat of the revelation of the inner mysteries of God, from the obscuring dust of all acquired knowledge and the illusions of the embodiments of satanic fancy. He must purge his breast, which is the sanctuary of the abiding love of the beloved, of every defilement, and sanctify his soul from all that pertaineth to water and clay, from all shadowy and ephemeral attachments. He must so cleanse his heart that no remnant of either love or hate may linger therein, lest that love blindly incline him to error, or that hate repel him away from the truth. Even as thou dost witness in this day how most of the people, because of such love and hate, are bereft of the immortal face, have strayed far from the embodiments of the divine mysteries, and shepherdless are roaming through the wilderness of oblivion and error, that seeker must at all times put his trust in God, must renounce the peoples of the earth, detach himself from the world of dust, and cleave unto Him who is the Lord of lords. He must never seek to exalt himself above anyone, must wash away from the tablet of his heart every trace of pride and vainglory, must cling unto patience and resignation, observe silence, and refrain from idle talk. For the tongue is a smoldering fire, and excess of speech a deadly poison. Material fire consumeth the body, whereas the fire of the tongue devoureth both heart and soul. The force of the former lasteth but for a time, whilst the effects of the latter endure a century. O ye loved ones of the Lord, praise be to Him, the unseen. Welling bounties of the Sun of Truth encompass you on every side. And from every direction the portals of His mercy stand ajar. Now is the time to take advantage of these bestowals and benefit therefrom. Know ye the value of this time. Let not this chance escape you. Stay ye entirely clear of this dark world's concerns, and become ye known by the attributes of those essences that make their home in the kingdom. Then shall ye see how intense is the glory of the heavenly day star, and how blindingly bright are the tokens of bounty coming out of the invisible realm. Know thou of a certainty that love is the secret of God's holy dispensation, the manifestation of the All-Merciful, the fountain of spiritual outpourings. Love is heaven's kindly light, the Holy Spirit's eternal breath that vivifieth the human soul. Love is the cause of God's revelation unto man, the vital bond inherent in accordance with the divine creation, in the reality of things. Love is the one means that ensureth true felicity, both in this world and the next. Love is the light that guideth in darkness, the living link that uniteth God with man, that assureth the progress of every illumined soul. Love is the most great law that ruleth this mighty and heavenly cycle, the unique power that bindeth together the diverse elements of this material world, the supreme magnetic force that directeth the movements of the spheres in the celestial realms. Love revealeth with unfailing and limitless power the mysteries latent in the universe. Love is the spirit of life unto the adorned body of mankind, the establisher of true civilization in this mortal world, and the shedder of imperishable glory upon every high-aiming race and nation. There is a power in this cause, a mysterious power, far, far, far away from the ken of men and angels. That invisible power is the cause of all these outward activities. It moves the hearts, it rends the mountains, it administers the complicated affairs of the cause. It inspires the friends. It dashes into 1,000 pieces all the forces of opposition. It creates new spiritual worlds. This is a mystery of the kingdom of Abha. O ye roses in the garden of God's love, O ye bright lamps in the assemblage of His knowledge, may the soft breathings of God pass over you. May the glory of God illumine the horizon of your hearts. Ye are the waves of the deep sea of knowledge. Ye are the massed armies on the plains of certitude. Ye are the stars in the skies of God's compassion. Ye are the stones that put the people of perdition to flight. Ye are clouds of divine pity over the gardens of life. Ye are the abundant grace of God's oneness that is shed upon the essence of all created things. On the outspread tablet of this world, ye are the verses of His singleness, and atop lofty palace towers, ye are the banners of the Lord. In His bowers are ye the blossoms and sweet-smelling herbs. In the rose garden of the Spirit, the nightingales that have plaintive cries. Ye are the birds that soar upward into the firmament of knowledge, the royal falcons on the wrist of God. Why then are ye quenched? Why silent? Why leaden and dull? Ye must shine forth like the lightning, and raise up a clamoring like unto the great sea. Like a candle must ye shed your light, and even as the soft breezes of God must ye blow across the world. Even as sweet breaths from heavenly bowers, as musk-laden winds from the gardens of the Lord, must ye perfume the air for the people of knowledge, and even as the splendors shed by the true sun, must ye illumine the hearts of humankind. For ye are the life-laden winds, ye are the jasmine scents from the gardens of the saved. Bring then life to the dead, and awaken those who slumber. In the darkness of the world be ye radiant flames. In the sands of perdition be ye wellsprings of the water of life. Be ye guidance from the Lord God. Now is the time to serve. Now is the time to be on fire. Know ye the value of this chance, this favorable juncture that is limitless grace, ere it slip from your hands. Soon will our handful of days, our vanishing life be gone, and we shall pass empty-handed into the hollow that is dug for those who speak no more. Wherefore must we bind our hearts to the manifest beauty and cling to the lifeline that faileth never. We must gird ourselves for service, kindle love's flame, and burn away in its heat. We must loose our tongues till we set the world's heart afire, and with bright rays of guidance blot out the armies of the night. And then, for His sake, on the field of sacrifice, fling down our lives. Thus let us scatter over every people the treasured gems of the recognition of God, and with the decisive blade of the tongue and the sure arrows of knowledge, let us defeat the hosts of self and passion, and hasten onward to the site of martyrdom, to the place where we die for the Lord. And then with flying flags and to the beat of drums, let us pass into the realm of the all-glorious and join the company on high. Well is it with the doers of great deeds.